birthday-ish, America. Depending on what day you are watching this awesome pre-tape, it's right around America's birthday. That's how we do things here. Not sure what day exactly it is, but you guys know because you're watching it live. Kind of. So today we are talking about a fan question that we have expanded into a massive story based off of a response that actually our very own Ed Greer gave to this. Ed knows my secret today, guys, and I'm just not, I don't know if we can make eye contact with each other for most of this show. We'll leave it at that, but he's avoiding me because he knows my secret. Coming in at the tail end of my secret, too, Emma Fyffe.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Glad to be here again, or for the first time this week, depending on the order that episodes air. Let's do this thing.
Should we be wishing America a happy birthday today?
Happy birthday, America.
Oh, no.
Maybe. Today, yesterday, tomorrow.
We're not sure.
We're somewhere in there.
Maggie Mayfish, should we be wishing America a happy birthday?
No, we shouldn't. No.
We don't deserve it this year?
We don't deserve it. Let's just wait until we get to like the 500 mark, and then maybe I'll be like, okay, we're not a blip in the timeline.
It's so true. Like, do you ever travel in, say, Europe or somewhere and go, wow, this building is older than our entire country?
Oh, yeah.
Well, absolutely, without a doubt. But even when I'm back home in Boston, I'm like, this feels more like we should wish them a happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in Boston.
Living
in California? No, I mean, we're still little babies.
Well, also, if you're in California and you live in the Valley, I'm sorry that your dog is still freaked out by all the fireworks. I'm really sorry for whoever your dog is.
What are you supposed to do?
He'll chill out. He'll chill out in 3 days.
I don't know when you have a dog though how you're supposed to help. Like I feel like a little bit of Xanax in the puppy chow. No,
you can listen. They make CBD for pets. They do.
Ryan, edit that out, Ryan. Cut that. I'm just kidding.
Encourage giving your animals
totally making
drugs.
A joke. All right.
Take two. We can't say the word.
Here we have to save us is this awesome fan question coming from Reality Check. I'm just going to leave what just happened be. We're going to leave it behind us. Reality Check says, what is the secret of a great adaptation? So we've got tons to talk about with this. I believe when you were responding to it, Ed, you were talking about Black Panther and why that was so great.
Well, it came from this thing about like which, storylines of different comic books you'd like to see done. And I just merely stated there was a Black Panther one where he basically he fought white supremacy, basically. And, if for the big giant bunch of resources like that, and then these white supremacists came into Wakanda and they were just like, nah, just a bunch of bums and I'll smack you up. And he didn't have any of his powers, any of his money, anything. He was like way less off than Batman when he beat these guys up. And he did just like his origin story with the Fantastic Four. He just smacked up these superpower people with no powers. And it was like a great inspirational, story to me. And I would just love for the movies to go more in that direction of like, not necessarily I am technologically better than you, I'm physically superior to you, and I'm smarter than you. Maybe a couple of those things, but you have something over me, but I can still beat you with grit.
Yeah, and I think, too, just sort of like building onto that, I think that a lot of the adaptations, particularly within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that have been incredibly successful are the ones that are essentially genre films. Like I look at something like Captain America Winter Soldier, which is such a good adaptation of that material, makes it more relevant to like a current events kind of situation. However, still ultimately at the end of the day feels sort of like a 70s spy thriller in a really good way. But it's when, they lean into that whole idea of it's not just about the superpowers. In fact, the superpowers are very secondary in that film, in my opinion. So
Into the Spider-Verse. An incredible adaptation, such a genre film. That was one of my favorite adaptations probably in the past 10 years. It was so great.
Great segue into our next question, which is, what is your actual favorite adaptation of either a comic book or your book that has been made into a film? So we've gotten some Captain America, some Spider-Verse, but your actual favorite, Ed, what would it be?
I don't know that any of my super favorites have gotten to be made movies yet, except I'd say probably the Infinity War situation.
Okay.
Because when I was a kid and I was reading Thanos, he was always kicking it with Death, and Death was like this woman that he really liked and was trying to impress. So like, we're getting murdered because, you know, you're like some kind of weird incel? This sucks.
Yeah.
He's a space cell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he gets off Reddit for 5 minutes and ruins the universe. Like, that's messed up. That's like messed up.
Yeah.
So those were always the story. So when I saw these wonderful, glorious, very deep psychological movies that they made out of that story, I was very surprised and very heartened. So that's probably my favorite so far.
Emma, what do you got for?
I got Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah, you do.
What a fun adaptation of that graphic novel. I was talking to somebody not that long ago who said that, you know, they'd read the graphic novel growing up, but kind of went that they didn't really get it until they saw the film. It's such a good adaptation. And it also is a really good example of something that takes this really interesting source material and then also really respects the fact that it is a film and does a lot of stuff that you can't necessarily do just in a drawing on a page. You know, incorporating all of the video game sound effects and the coins and all the stuff that gives it that, like, that makes it feel very true to the graphic novel, but still distinguishes it as being a film.
Okay. What are you thinking?
So this is not a comic book adaptation, but Muppet Treasure Island is a wonderful adaptation of a very classic novel.
I raised you Treasure Planet on that. So underrated.
Ooh, checkmate. Checkmate.
No, but I love Muppet Treasure Island. Go on.
It's great, but again, also a very genre film. They added it's a Muppet film which is, you could say that like Puppets Muppets is its own genre. So again, I think that is why it works so well. And then also the comedy of like weaving the characters that we know in with the like historical characters of the Treasure Island story.
It's like having the Simpsons do something like Ahab has to be Homer and so on and so forth.
Similar that it's not a comic book adaptation, but different in everything else. To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's a pretty good adaptation.
Very, very similar to Muppet Treasure Island.
Truly.
Doing the work that we need to see. Yeah, I love that adaptation. What do you guys think makes these adaptations, like what is the number one thing that you need if it is a comic book from panel to screen? What do you need to see in order for that to translate? Because obviously there's been a ton of really horrible adaptations that we will talk about later, but are you looking for it to look the exact same? Are you okay if it looks very different as long as it kind of finds the same heart? What do you need?
I think I'm okay with it looking different as long as it commits to what it is and is like tonally the same, you know, like I think that's the thing is with a lot of adaptations, you know, you look at something like Peter Jackson's take on Lord of the Rings, which is fantastic, that original trilogy, and in it it's like, did they cover every single little detail of the books? No, you really didn't need to, because there's like 40 pages describing what trees look like. But so it's like it's finding ways to trim the fat but like break down whatever your source material is into what it is about at its core. And I would say that maybe 9 times, at least 8 times out of 10, ultimately that boils down to it being the relationship between the characters. And when you shift the focus to that, but still include, you know, things like in Endgame, you finally got your like massive 2-page spread of everybody assembled to like take on Thanos in that final battle. So I think that but ultimately, why that works and why that feels so epic is because you've spent time with all of these characters and you know what they mean to each other and you care about them. So that for me is the biggest thing.
Ed, what about you? What do you need to make sure happens?
You know, I think it's really complicated, and I think Emma's got her finger on the pulse of it. It's
Emma.
this weird like how do you respect it without being indentured to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
How do you respect it? You know, because there's going to be so many times when you, as a person with 25 more years in a lot of cases of life experience and history behind you, looking at this older thing that you're trying to adapt, you can cut some corners and do some things that they couldn't do on the page. But if you don't feel as though you can, you'll commit the same mistakes, quote unquote, that they did, so on and so forth. So it's like it's really it's a really fine line between respecting the source material and also recognizing the fact that all of these things do work as genre fiction, but you can't cut it all the way out.
No.
Like a Daredevil that's just about lawyering sucks.
Yeah. It's very true.
Words to live by.
Words to live by.
Dum Daredevil.
Yeah, I think both. Yeah, absolutely. And a thing that I think that these filmmakers need to be really good at is like critical reading. Like, because when they're reading the source material, it is like, what is essential? What is the heart of this? I think of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Everyone loves it because it has such that, like, the heart of Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
His like struggle and what he stands for is so clear, even though, again, it doesn't have everything that every Spider-Man origin story has. But it feels like he really took the source material, critically read, again, trimmed the fat, saw what was essential, and then was able to bring his own flair to it, which I do think directors are very important when making adaptations because, again, that's going to be what makes it feel a little bit different. And in Sam Raimi's case, I think it worked because his like comedy added to the story, whereas in other cases, maybe not so much.
For me, I feel like the main thing is if you're being true to the character, not as much the plot.
Yes.
Because I can't stand when when I've read something or there's source material showing me who somebody is, and then you just decide that's not who they are. That doesn't feel right. It's almost like an improv or sketch. If you have a character that you do, you can place them in any situation. It's still that character. So I don't mind putting them in different scenarios and different scenes, but don't all of a sudden tell me that a character doesn't care that his parents abandoned him when clearly that's what made him who he is.
Sure. Well, it's even like if you're adapting something and say, obviously, you know, it's not a direct adaptation of it, but Logan is obviously clearly very heavily inspired by Old Man Logan.
Yeah.
And, you know, so like Hawkeye is a major character in the actual comic book of Old Man Logan, but just because he's not in the film Logan doesn't mean that like tonally it doesn't match what it is. And most importantly, that Wolverine he's portrayed faithfully, even in a slightly altered story.
Speaking of that, do you think that in either that story or any story, the adaptation is actually better than the OG? So than the source material? Have we ever seen one on screen where we're like, well, actually that did more than justice to...
This is complex, but I was shocked by how much I loved Alita Battle Angel. And
Maggie liked that one a lot.
My roommates walked out of that movie. I didn't see it, so this is
it's
not
okay.
against you.
It's fine. And I'm sure the internet will come at me and be like, how could you possibly love that? No. But I read the manga as a kid. I watched the first OVA, which the movie is basically a direct adaptation of that. And the movie to me is certainly better than the first OVA that they did, which they never continued making more of it. But it's kind of like the first storyline, basically within Alita, of the whole idea of them like trying to get to the city that's up in the sky, and I think that the reason that film was so successful for me was exactly what I was talking about before, is it really shifted the focus to be on the relationship between the characters. I look at somebody like Shirin, the character that Jennifer Connelly played. In the OVA, they like broadcast so hard that she's a bad guy. And I liked in this adaptation that they really addressed the fact that like she and the Doctor had been in a relationship with one another. And that they had that they had a child, because it made it make more sense that like he had this very fatherly connection to Alita, and it really strengthened their relationship. Yeah. Because originally like her name is Gally in the OVA and in the manga, and she's like named after his cat. You know what I mean? So like instead the idea of like she's named after his daughter and she has his
Don't name
daughter's
someone
cyborg
after
body.
your cat.
Exactly.
Not a good move.
So
I own a cat and I own a.
I don't know about
But
that.
yeah, so to me, it just again like because they made those relationships so believable, I totally bought the story and I was very immersed in it.
Okay. Ed, is there an adaptation that's better?
I'm gonna be a basic BR and go Iron Man because like everybody said, like you ask any one of these over or underweight males in these comic book shops and they will say, I hated Captain America.
Yeah.
Unless they're a certain type of guy a lot of guys who loved Captain America back in the days you need to watch out for. Full stop. But the new versions of Captain America from the movies and from probably the last 10, 15 years of comics and the new version of Iron Man specifically from the movies.
Yeah.
They're such more relatable characters. They're less of everything that's crappy about them. There's less of these rich boy corporate room problems and more of my moral awakening situation. Less of this like, Aryan super dude always right, and more of this, wow, America's kind of a parallax view type of situation. Huh? You know what I mean? There's a lot more of that going on in the movies than in the original source material, and that makes them both more relatable, more intelligent, and also more cogent stories for people who haven't read omnibuses full of this crap all day.
Totally.
So like I think that's very valuable. What they've done.
Good pick. Any picks for you?
Yeah, I hesitate to say it's better than the source material, but I think it's a great example. And I'm about to give a caveat. So, the Pokemon movie that recently came out. Detective Pikachu.
So good.
Where I had problems with the story, but every single Pokemon element, I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Are you a big Pokemon girl?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Have you played the Detective Pikachu video game?
No, I have not.
Okay, so it's so funny because it is literally I saw a Q&A with the director and he was talking about how basically these two projects were being developed simultaneously, so they literally were just working off of the game script.
Whoa!
So it truly I know people have issues with the story and I respect them 100%, but honestly, it's essentially a direct adaptation of the game.
Also, JTE, can you please isolate Maggie Mae Fish's soundbite? So, whoa!
We're gonna get drops out of all.
They're unbelievable. Have you guys been paying attention?
The morning
Especially
Zoo
when
crew.
Emma talks, there's some connection here. Yeah.
Listen, I was on the bench a lot on my basketball team, so I like to be involved.
I love that.
I'm very supportive from the sidelines.
I absolutely love it. Well, another question for you guys. How do you think the best adaptations work? Is it when they go from book to movie to TV show to miniseries? What is the recipe for success, or at least so far that we've seen? What do you think the best place to end up is?
I think that consistently, and some of that is just very much the era that we live in of, the great overarching MCU, that so far it seems that the best track record is something like a comic book or a graphic novel to film. But I don't think that there's like a surefire way to do it. I think that the reason we're seeing so many really good comic book adaptations in film these days is because the people who are making the movies now are people who grew up loving the source material and are infusing that love into the films that they're creating. But now I feel like we finally saw something that was like a good live action adaptation of an anime or a manga in Battle Angel Alita and a really good video game adaptation in Detective Pikachu, so weird story issues aside. So I think that ultimately what it boils down to is just the right person for the right project,
And then that depends on and the right project for the right adaptation.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that's very true. And the image that came to mind was the Sonic adaptation.
Oh,
Don't get me started because I'm the only human being on the planet who thinks that Sonic looks amazing. So
No, now I'm in the camp that they should just release the original Sonic. I will
Give
go
me
up
the
in
OG.
arms. just release it because you
100%.
can't take that back. Once you've made that, you can't take it back.
And you shouldn't take it back from me.
But just the
You shouldn't.
fact that we live in
to
a
Roxy.
but the fact that we live in a world where there's some kind of Snyder cut of Sonic is just nuts. That's just nuts.
Release the Sonic.
But it's like the people in charge of that movie, what did they like about Sonic? Because it's clearly not what I like about Sonic. Yeah. And it seems to not be what a lot of people like.
So I gave them a text message that described everything I wanted to see, and then they perfectly did it. So do you think to movie is not the best adaptation then?
I think it can absolutely be done. I just think, again, we talked about like keeping, making sure that the character feels the same. Sonic just kind of came off as a wet blanket.
But see, that's kind of to your point. That I think that is interesting about like all these characters that have all of this history that you can draw from. That's great, but it's just like having a lot of like if somebody told you there was like 10 gold Krugerrand coins, but they were in one. They were in this giant pile
right.
that you have to go through and find
yes.
it. That sucks because like you might find the wrong ones. You might find some bronze coins, mix them in, and I think that's what happens when like if some corporate bunghole decided to adapt Iron Man.
They're a what hole?
Bunghole. If some corporate bunghole decided to do Iron Man, Iron Man could have been a guy in a suit for the whole movie, and he spends 10 minutes in a cave and goes, brushes his shoulders off, that was kind of whack. Back to the boardroom. That if someone like that, with that sort of ethos, wrote that movie, greed is good, everybody. My Iron Man suit proves that capitalism is awesome. That could have been what that movie was, because half of the comic book is that way.
Very true.
So, I mean, so it's like, I think you just got to pick the right things.
I agree completely
out of all
with
this
that.
mountain.
But for me, the best case is when it's an awesome TV show. Probably because I love TV shows. But I'm still ride or die Walking Dead. I know I get some looks. It's the best it's ever been. I love it. Preacher, ride or die. Like, I think that these shows are so incredible, and you guys know I watch all Lucifer, Flash, Arrow.
I was gonna say, and I'm gonna bring up while we're on the topic of really good TV adaptations, Good Omens.
I don't watch.
So
interesting.
Good.
So if you do it right, then it gives us more time to live with these people.
That's true.
Right.
Which is why video games should be trying to
do television
television.
adaptations.
Television.
Yeah.
Why don't you get it?
I mean, you think also too about how much time you spend with a video game. It's a lot more than it takes to read an issue of a comic. Like if you spend the amount of time that you spend reading like the issue of a comic playing a video game, you will have maybe started the tutorial, and that's it.
But also the fact that they even try to make video game movies is weird to me, because number one, most video game characters are empty ciphers. I don't care if you talk about Samus or whoever the hell, all these great characters who are great characters, but when you match them up against any character from literature, a character from a children's book will defeat a video game character in gravitas a lot of the time.
It's like a really good JRPG that's like 70 plus hours
obviously,
long.
but it would have to be something like that. Yeah, 87-hour long campaign character that you built from the ground.
Yeah,
but
it's
you
like
see,
some Mass Effect
but
kind
you
of stuff.
see how hard that is
hard.
to put in somebody else's purview, somebody else's mind, or your super dope character that you built forever.
Exactly, because with video games too, it's like the point is that there's something for you to play and do. So a lot of the time, you truly are like Lara Croft. You're just like swinging through the forest, like running around, raiding tombs.
I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it.
No, those games are fun.
Yeah. And when you said, for some reason, when you said any children's book, do you guys remember The Missing Piece?
No.
The circle that had like it almost looked like a Pac-Man. There was part of it chopped out of it. I'm just picturing just this empty like vessel of a children's book trying to turn into a movie. Somebody out there feels me right now. One of you does. Ryan, The Missing Piece? No? Yeah? No. Okay, great transition. Speaking of the bells, before we move on to what we do not want to see from adaptations and a little bit more about what we do want to see, don't forget that we're here on Fandom Entertainment and we want you to like and subscribe. I'm letting Ryan get over there and hit that bell. Yeah. Oh, Ryan, Ryan, I
doesn't
set
work
you
when you're
up,
holding
and
it in the air.
you can't hit the bells together, Ryan. You gotta hit the. Oh, he tried to spice it up, and it didn't work, guys. I don't even know if they heard that, but Ryan ran over the bells. There was a whole thing. We also have incredible other content for you guys, like Fandom Uncovered, which has been such a cool thing watching Roth work on that. And Power Levels, you might recognize the voice over there. Spoiler alert, it's me. I'm the voice of Power Levels. It's time for Power Levels. How does that sound? It was good. Thanks,
that was just
guys.
like the album.
Thank you.
Maybe that's why, because somebody tweeted.
This is Power Levels.
Somebody tweeted at me and was like, "Great job on Power Levels," and I was like, "I didn't do anything."
I do hear often that we are the same person.
Oh, okay, great. So good to know. I'm very honored to be the same person as you,
blonde,
Roxy.
parody, same. I will take that compliment all day. But we're really excited for you guys to see more what we're working on there. So don't forget, Fandom Entertainment. Look out for those things. Now let's get into the nitty gritty of what we do not want to see. Any stories, guys, that you are like, if somebody tries to adapt this, I might just throw a printer out of a building. Don't know why.
That's very specific,
Yeah.
Roxy.
I don't know where that came from. Yes, I do. Got it before.
I think one that's going to be way too hard is like almost any of the crossover events in Marvel. Because like right now, like the Punisher and like Conan and somebody else are in like Valhalla fighting somebody with Venom and just
Great.
crazy. It's super dope for a book, but trying to explain what got all of them there.
Theoretically, in a TV show, though, couldn't you do
Yeah,
that? If you build them all up
If you built them all up separately, and there was TV stories.
Yeah, something like that. But also, there's another one, the new Secret Wars, where like Doctor Doom makes a whole new world and makes A-Force. I want to see A-Force movie, but I don't need it. I don't think it needs
to live
in some alternate reality.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean we need to go to an alternate reality for a bunch of women who have superpowers to think that they'd rather kick it with each other? Oh, that's an alternate reality. Okay, we need that.
How do we explain this? We've been getting along. I just can't.
Yeah.
I hate everybody at this table. What about you, Emma? Anything?
I think that what I definitely don't want to see is origin stories we've already seen adapted again.
You don't want to see the pearls falling at the beginning of Batman?
How many times we have to see how Batman became Batman?
But the pearls are so pretty.
Beautiful.
Release a Snyder cut.
Don't need to see that anymore. Don't need to see Uncle Ben die ever again.
He's a rough end of the stick.
But that, not to interrupt, but that gets me to one point Billy Business said on Twitter, which I totally agree with. He goes, the same people who are going like, you abused my character, you didn't do him right, you stupid ass. Then they go, oh, don't tell me any spoilers or else.
Right.
And they're just, so they don't want spoilers to the story they already want to hear.
Yeah. Right.
But if you don't do that exactly right, they're super mad. So it's like they've built themselves into a machine who can't be pleased.
Oh, they just want to be mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very true.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
This is like, again, similar. I have no interest in like movies about authors of these books. Authors are not inherently interesting.
They're very quiet and internal.
And very internal. Yeah. A lot of them probably have very normal, boring stories, like all of us. Like, they're just normal people who are good at, like, I don't know. And they always try to make it some, like, epic, like, story, and it's usually just not. And they can't make it interesting. And a lot of the times, these authors are very problematic, so they also have to, like, skip over a bunch of things, so it comes off, like, inauthentic. I'm sure there are great author stories out there. It just seems like they choose a cool source material, then hope that the author was like really cool, and then they start making a movie about it.
The ones that are cool are when you're like a ghostwriter, or back in the day when you're a woman, so you're not allowed to write because you can't have a mind.
Yeah, you have to write out a pseudonym,
things like that. Those are interesting. But if it's just like chilling, just normal.
Yeah.
Great, you just got to do the thing that you liked.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired.
Yeah.
Oh God, what's the movie with Melissa McCarthy that just came out?
Please forgive me.
Please forgive me.
That's what it is.
That
good.
movie is really good.
So good.
And by the way, there's going to be some people in the chat going like, he just said that to please those ladies. No, I love that movie.
Why would you
say that to please those ladies? I mean, she's like an awful human being.
But again, they really don't let women be awful. It's, you know what I mean?
I think that's what's so good about the film.
Because guess what? Some of us suck. Not all of us, but they are out there. Yeah, that movie was that. Okay, so I take back everything about the author thing. If it's stories like that, then we absolutely.
But like you said, it's because her voice had been diminished, and through ageism and sexism combined, her voice had been diminished. So that made her story interesting. But hearing that Tolkien kicked it with a bunch of homies, and they became the Fellowship, it's like, oh yeah, and Hunter S. Thompson did a bunch of drugs in the desert, and da 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 da. Like, stop.
And so many of them are so fictionalized too. You know what I mean? Like I don't hate Becoming Jane, which is the Jane Austen movie about Jane Austen with
why is it always, especially with music stuff, it's like, man, Jane doesn't love me. Guess you can't buy love. Can't buy me love. Why? Why is that always the way?
I like what you did there.
Always how it is.
For me, this one's going to be a little controversial. Ooh. What I never want to see, despite all of you petitioners out there, is another Game of Thrones adaptation for just the final season.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a book released and then us go back and just retcon what we saw and do another season. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Leave it alone. Put your time and energy somewhere else.
Yeah. Move on.
Move forward with your lives. Have kids. Yeah. Go to Paris.
Have kids and don't name them problematic stuff.
Well, there were. Did you see a lot of people who had named? Yeah. That's sorry to anybody named Danny out there now.
Mm-hmm. Or not.
Yeah, or not, because she's still a great character.
Yeah. But hey, people go through things and things
phases.
That's so kind. Yeah, that's a very kind way to put it. Danny went through some stuff in the last season.
Let's talk about the real tea, though. Some of our least favorite adaptations and why. And do you think that they were failed because the source material never should have been adapted, or do you think it was just a bad adaptation and it could have been done better? Maggie?
Well, I wrote this down. I did not, I guess this is like an adaptation. Okay, the new Ghostbusters, a very controversial subject. I personally just don't like Paul Feig. He does great things certain times, but I feel like his directing style, I think, diminished the story, relying so much on improv. So again, that was like a not so great adaptation, but I don't think it was because it can never be adapted at all.
No, because I'm with you. I loved the idea of it, but then it was frustrating to me that they didn't like set it in the same universe as OG Ghost. But
why they didn't trust themselves that they could be part of the universe. They just didn't trust themselves.
And the fact that they had to like blow their budget on the 2 cameos from the old, like there are so many things that went into it. But again, I do think that is to say that I think the director can have a lot of sway whether something works or doesn't work. And yeah, the Paul Feig isms that I saw in it, I was like, ooh, I don't know if that is serving this adaptation specifically.
Yeah. Add any ones that you just hate?
I mean, I'm gonna bait the most rabid fan base in the history of the universe.
Bring out the fans.
Go.
I don't understand why people don't understand what's wrong with the Watchmen adaptation.
Oh my God. Okay, cool. Because that was going to be my answer, but I have another one. But please continue. Please continue.
But are you excited for the show because you think it can be adapted, or do you think that Watchmen should never be adapted?
Well, no. You know the reason why I think the show might be good is because it ignores all the stuff that happened in the movie. The stuff that happened in the movie already happened. Yeah. So what I posit that the show is going to be about is somebody finding Rorschach's journal, which lays out the whole plan and how the world was duped, and that thread unraveling over the course of seasons and different, like the Wire with that, unraveling. So I think I could see that being super good. But the problem with the movie adaptation to me isn't just some of the changes; it's that I don't think Snyder understood the tone. When you see the regular human characters, people like yourself and myself, and they're going to an alley and then some dudes fight them and they're kicking those people 57 feet. Well, then when John Osterman shows up with his big blue wiener, is that interesting?
Yeah.
Everybody's a super guy in this world. The whole book was, I'm trying to be super, but I just got some gloves, some Burt Ward gloves, doing this in an alley.
That's not cool enough.
That was the whole point.
I totally agree with you.
Superman, God is what is, God's an American.
Right.
That's what they were saying about John Osterman.
Yes.
How one super person can impact a bunch of super people. Show them who they are. Show them how weak they are. Show them how human they are from him being so unknowable. I didn't get that from that movie at all.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody did.
I'm so excited for the Lindelof Watchmen adaptation because I feel like, and again, it's one of those things where I think that some of what Watchmen suffered from in some ways is having too much money. Like, it shouldn't be that big and over the top. It's a very intimate story.
Absolutely.
That's what's so good about Watchmen. And I think Lindelof does such a good job of telling stories about, like, doomed humanity.
Like, all the money should have been a little bit of production design because of the 80s world and just the rest on Osterman.
Yeah.
Everything else should have been, like, Barney Miller or something.
Yeah. Just put some squibs and blood capsules and, special effects makeup and real punches. Like, good fight choreography. That's what you needed. Not special effects.
Yeah,
you said you
Daredevil level budget.
Yes.
Daredevil Netflix level budget.
That's also Zack Snyder would never do that.
I know.
And it would just, and
He was the
again,
wrong
that's the
director.
thing. It's
It's
like
gotta look pretty. You guys don't get it.
And bombastic too.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a subtle bone in his body.
No, it's not the word that he lives by for sure. Emma, you had another one now.
I'm pretty outspoken about this on the internet in general, but you can throw away all those X-Men movies. Let's just, even though I was like, I don't want to see any origin stories. This doesn't necessarily have to be an origin story, but it's like, let's just start again. Let's just start again with X-Men. Let's bring it back to like the peak of all X-Men, which was the 90s cartoon. Obviously, this is very influenced by my age and where I was in life when I was first exposed to X-Men. But yeah, I have always found those adaptations to be frustrating, especially because, by and large, with the exception of Anna Paquin as Rogue, who I do not like, I don't dislike Anna Paquin as an actor, I just do not like her in that role. There was a lot of potential with that first X-Men movie, and I respect that movie was so important in terms of pushing us into the direction that we went with the superhero genre film and taking it more seriously. But what I want to see is Jubilee in a bright yellow coat. You know what I mean? Like, and I want a sassy adult Rogue that like has a boatload of issues, but it's not teen angst.
While we're at it, can we also figure out Fan 4?
I know. I love Fantastic Four. I do too.
It's like no one injects.
You love the movie?
No, I love the stories. Fantastic Four.
Okay, I was gonna say,
She
wow,
sounded so
hot take.
concerned.
Hot take.
Intervention time.
I just don't understand how, like, in this most recent one, you take legitimately one of the best cast of actors in that movie in so long and just decide that you're gonna not do a good job.
Yeah.
Like, I know there's more to it than that, but gosh.
Was there?
Also, it's one of those things where you can tell that it isn't just about a new version of a character. It's almost like they're embarrassed
That's what
of
it
it.
is.
You know what I mean?
It's a little cheesy. It's about a family, but that's what it's about. And like that's not something you can
it's
just
about military industrial complex.
and, like,
Definitely
they get
not.
cool powers, right, guys? It's like no, it's about them being a cheesy family and then being there for each other. And when you take that out of it, you're not looking at the source material critically.
And the stuff that they change, and not to bash that movie too hard, because you know what? Josh Trank is his name.
Yes,
who directed
Josh
it.
Trank.
I follow him on Twitter. And
I
he's,
guess Josh Trank is his name.
No, I'm just making sure because there's a few maligned filmmakers, and he is so humble on Twitter about like, yeah, man, sorry, bro.
It's like George Clooney when he talks about Batman. He's
Right.
yeah, sorry guys, I wasn't great.
Yeah, and not to harp on it, but it's like it doesn't understand. Like even when you change stuff, like okay, they changed all this stuff, they still gave Sue Storm nothing to do.
Right.
After they changed everything, they still give her nothing to do.
Can create force fields, and force fields are amazing.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
she's
very
literally
true.
the most powerful of them, and they mitigate it every single movie, and I don't understand that. And then again, I think that'd be so much more interesting.
Yeah.
We have to get out of here soon, but before we do, just any personal wants, a story that you were dying to see on the big screen. I know, Ed, you said that it's more about, not that we haven't seen Black Panther, but the version that you want, but is there another one that you're...
just less like OP. Like, I love Black Panther, but I would love to see, my thing I say all the time is like, you're not brave if you can't die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, if, he's like looking at F-16 shoot bullets this big at him, he's like, suckers. And then we have to believe that he's going to die in hand-to-hand combat with another person.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense to me. So just take it down a notch.
Okay.
Also, I would love to see, but the thing I would love to see adapted is either The Authority or Planetary. Both of those are Wildstorm comics written by Warren Ellis, and I think before DC bought them, what Wildstorm's whole thing, they were down with Image, their whole thing was, what if superheroes were actually really, really real? So like the Authority are a group of superheroes that are more or less as powerful as a JLA, but they run the earth. And not like in a boys way where it's like they're jerks about it, but the president thinks they're a jerk. You know what I mean? And Warren Ellis has always said that like he doesn't like heroes who fight for the status quo. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like so many superheroes are fighting for the status quo to keep the wrong people in power, to keep the Bilderbergs in power, basically. You know what I mean? A lot of these superheroes fight to keep the status quo in power, whereas Authority are just like, no. If there's an alternate universe where they're setting up camps for people and they're hurting people, we'll just go to that alternate universe and beat their ass. And we don't care about any Geneva Convention because we're above all that. And that's the Authority is I think that's a very interesting concept.
Very inspiring to rise above the status quo to do exactly what is right.
Right.
That's really cool.
When you have the power to do so. And very finally, Planetary, very simply, it's just about the unexplored history of the superhero universe of Wildstorm. So like in like 1919, Thomas Edison and a bunch of dudes made a supercomputer that made multiverses, and it blew up and messed up a lot of stuff and left a bunch of shards all across reality and weird thing, Indiana Jonesian sort of adventures for this group of this troika. A really super strong woman, a guy who has cold powers, and a dude who does machines.
Oh my god!
And
Fun adaptation.
Yeah, and they do. They're the archaeologists of the challengers of the unknown type book. I would love to see that because it's about superheroes, but not.
Yeah. Emma?
Good Omens was so good. I just want to see more Terry Pratchett. I want it. I want a really good Discworld series. That's it. Oh, and a She-Hulk courtroom drama.
Simple ass, guys.
Yes.
Okay, is that yours also?
That's
I would say
nice.
that's mine also.
Yeah.
I'll also throw in there, I would, now that we've moved so much towards like comic books for adult films, I would like to see some go back the other way. I want to see some like comic movies for
kids.
Kids with adult humor,
Sure, of
obviously,
course.
but like sometimes it loses that little magic, that little spark, and it's like, let's maybe make some like with that too.
Yeah, I like that. I'm with Emma that I just want to see more of the things I love, though. Do not cancel Swamp Thing and Doom Patrol. You're breaking my heart.
Yeah.
You're breaking my heart. And on that really nice note, we got to get out of here. So where can everybody keep up with you?
You can check out my podcast, nerdgoatpodcast.com. We just talk about deep dives of people's favorite fictional characters. I'd love to have everybody at this table on my podcast. I'm serious business.
Funny because he's never asked us before.
I'm doing it on the air.
On camera.
Number one. I haven't been in yes, Ryan's done it. A lot of Screen Junkies have done it, so I'm officially asking you guys. Let's do the thing. I'm doing it. And also just Ed Greer Destroys on Twitter and all that jazz. And you can check me out on Comedy Central. I did a show called The New Negroes, and you can check out me on this second episode. And SJU Monday and Wednesday.
Great. Emma, what about you?
I am Emma Fyffe. I can be found all over the internet at my name, Emma Fyffe. This weekend on Saturday, July 6th, I will be hosting Destination Funimation Live from Anime Expo. So be sure to check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Wow, you're keeping busy over America's birthday weekend.
I am keeping busy over America's birthday weekend, yes.
Maggie Fish, where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, just at my name, and on YouTube, where I put up video essays about films and politics and society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm Roxy Striar. You guys can find me at Roxy Striar. You can also keep finding this show either tomorrow or Monday, because it depends on which day it is currently. We'll see you guys then. Bye.